I know you've read it, but is it true? Would you really blow up your engine if you ran nitrous oxide on a dual plane intake manifold? Well, we're gonna find out using the 383 out of the Roadkill crop duster, this time on Engine Masters. Wives' tales. For lack of a more gender neutral term, that's the thing that I really love challenging here on Engine Masters, presented by AMSOIL, and here's the one that we're attacking this time. You've read it a bunch of times, I'm sure I've written it a bunch of times, it's been repeated so often. You can't run nitrous oxide in a dual plane intake manifold or you'll blow up your engine. Why? People say that it's got a nasty cylinder-to-cylinder distribution problem and that's gonna cause a problem in at least one hole of your engine. Well, we're gonna find out right now, and here's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna run both a dual plane and a single plane intake manifold on this big block Mopar, both naturally aspirated and with nitrous oxide, and we're gonna check that cylinder-to-cylinder distribution like this, with an oxygen sensor in every single header tube. So we're gonna know exactly what's happening in each cylinder. That's gonna give us answers like, is the dual plane really that dangerous? Does a single plane make more power on nitrous for the same nitrous jet than a dual plane? And we're also gonna answer questions about how much power this particular engine makes. Now here's what makes this engine cool. This is the 383 big block that is directly out of the Roadkill crop duster. You've probably seen that car. It's a white 1970 duster that's been on both my Roadkill show and on also Roadkill Garage. And it's a pretty easy buildup that has run 1160s in the car. Here's sort of the combo. Bottom end, stock crank, stock rods. It's got forged pistons, 11.5-to-1 compression. These heads are straight out of the box Edelbrock units, no big deal. Up top, we're gonna start off with the Performer RPM intake manifold from Edelbrock. The camshaft is a comp cam solid flat tappet. The duration at 50 thousandths is 241, 247. Up top, we've got an 850 Brawler carburetor. We're running MSD ignition on this thing. And now we're gonna roll it into the dyno, put some AMSOIL in it, and fire it up for a baseline to find out what this thing makes before we start huffing some nitrous through it. The stock crank and rods in this thing are gonna need all the help that they can get, and so even though it's kind of a basic deal, I'm gonna go all the way with the Dominator racing oil. Whenever I run a power adder, AMSOIL always tells me to run this stuff because it has a really strong film strength. And even though we got a small nitrous kit here, I think nitrous is one of the most abusive things on bearings, more so than a turbo or a blower, because you hit the button and bam, power increase like that. It's not like a slow boost curve. So this Dominator hopefully is gonna keep it alive, plus it's got a lot of zinc for that flat tappet cam. Oh man, I gotta keep the oil out of the fins on these valve covers. Okay. Okay, we're ready for our baseline, which is the Crop Duster 383, pretty much straight out of the car with the exception of a different header and different carburetor. It even still has the alternator and the water pump and stuff on it. So Steve's got it tuned up, ready to fire it up, see what it does.
It's gonna be cool to watch 8 oxygen sensors.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Real time. Lighter?
Yeah.
Why?
We knocked about 2 pounds of dirt off of it.
I didn't even look at the power numbers, I was looking at the Lambda.
It's shameful.
Is it?
Yeah, looking at 462.6 pound-feet at 4,400, and it made best horsepower of 459.6 at 5,800.
Wow.
I think there's a number of reasons for that. This header's much worse than what we ran before.
This is not a good header.
No, it's smaller tube, and this has a terrible collector on it. Plus, we have a mechanical water pump and alternator on it, and a different carburetor, and we're running 36 degrees of timing. This engine likes 40, but we wanted to do our nitrous testing A-B comparison with no other change other than the nitrous, and so we pulled a few degrees of timing out of it. But let's have a look at the whole curve. Yep, it's just down 40 horsepower from what we'd really like it to be. Honestly.
I think the header's an accessory drive, carburetor, it all adds up.
Yeah.
So.
And the timing.
And
the
timing. So it's not out of line entirely. You know what I noticed though, looking at the lambdas, there was quite a bit of variation. I mean, some of those holes, there were 2 ratio points difference or more.
Cylinder to cylinder?
Yeah.
Let's have a look at that. I mean, he's got it pulled up here.
Yeah, when you start looking at like cylinder number 2 finishes up at 11.9 and then 4 is 13.7.
Yeah.
Almost 2 full ratios in cylinders that are paired one next to the other, 2 and 4.
Yeah, and that's just a matter of air and fuel getting through the intake manifold.
And I've noticed it was kind of leveling out as RPMs increased. At
As
lower
airspeed
RPM, there was more
increases,
spread.
It seems to kind of,
Yeah.
when you see it here.
Oh!
See, this almost doesn't look too bad in scaling, but then you see this.
Yeah.
That's pretty frightening.
So that might be a cylinder that'll detonate and fail on you, while some of the other ones are so fat they would never detonate.
This is lean, and this down here is rich, and the scale here is almost 17 to 1 down to 11.1 to 1. So that's a big swing when you look at cylinder to cylinder. So we're going direct to nitrous. This is like a cute little nitrous system. It is an NOS power shot. It's a fixed 125 horsepower plate system. It's about the smallest that, you know, you can get outside of a Sneaky Pete.
Yeah.
But we'll see what it does. Hopefully it'll blow this thing to like, you know, almost 600 horsepower. Here's our arrangement for reading the air-fuel ratio in each individual cylinder. We took this old set of headers that Dulcich bought in like the 80s and then left in his backyard and wrecked them by drilling to put O2 bungs in every single hole and then booger welding them with no gas whatsoever. I put every one of them 13 inches from the port. You got to put them between 12 and 18 inches down. And the longest distance I was able to get was on this hole, which was 13 inches on center. And so that's what I did on all of them. And so we should be able to read accurately what's going on in each cylinder. Okay, we're ready for our nitrous testing now. This is a small nitrous hit, 125 shot, but nonetheless, we want to keep it really scientific between this and the other manifold. And so we're monitoring the nitrous bottle pressure out there at 92 degrees to make sure, or, you know, bottle temperature, which affects pressure at 92 degrees to make sure that it's the same for both runs. And we also have to get the engine temperature correct. So it's a little bit of a balancing act right now.
Okay, we should be pretty good right now.
Doesn't seem like we're getting nitrous
now. Okay, we gotta go mess with that. Looks like it's only flowing fuel. Well, my nitrous system had been sitting around for like 2 or 3 years and the solenoid was stuck. And so Steve had one of NOS's new sniper kits on hand. So we have that sniper kit now jetted at 56 on the nitrous, 47 on the fuel.
Should be close to 125,
Yeah.
130 maybe.
Neighborhood of.
Yeah, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, whack
wait.
it. So not bad, yeah. Did what expected, made 577.9 horsepower at 5,600 RPM. And the torque, yeah, it made 638 pound-feet. Usually peak torque happens right when you hit the button. So it picked up 100 horsepower, basically 110.
Yeah, so I could, you know, we could go up on the jet or just, but
Yeah, it's pretty
I think the reason we're here is to see what happens.
But let's talk about that. If you're flowing more nitrous through the intake manifold and more fuel, is it more of a demand on the dual plane? Like, might we see a bigger problem with the distribution on the dual plane with a bigger nitrous hit?
I suppose at some point.
Yeah.
But I don't think the guy that's running a dual plane is the same guy that's hitting it with a 350 shot.
Right, no, but I was
Right.
thinking like a 175 shot might be.
It didn't appear to me like it affected distribution all
And
that
I
much.
think, as I kind of suspected,
So the red lines are naturally aspirated, black lines are nitrous, and it's really got the same problems. But so would this make the argument that yes, you would have a problem running nitrous because it has distribution problems? Because we're still looking at 16
no, but that's a spike. The bigger the kit, even on a single plane, you will for maybe a tenth or two, you will see a spike.
Because the nitrous
Sometimes
hits
in
before
all
the
of
fuel?
them. Yeah, and so you're always going to see, you can see it in every air-fuel ratio, you'll see some sort of spike. The trick is how long will it be there? Some of the nitrous tuners actually will increase fuel pressure to 12 or 15, and then jet appropriately, jet down with more pressure to try and compensate for some of that.
Yeah, so then fuel gets there quicker, catches up with
sure.
nitrous a little bit quicker. But you're right, because you can see that it gets richer right afterwards, and then the flow is much tighter, but we're still looking at 13 to 1 on nitrous on some cylinders, and almost 10 to 1 on this one. So arguably the nitrous did tighten up the air-fuel ratios.
Slightly.
A little
It
bit.
wasn't what you would really hope for, but look, at least it shows that it's not a horrible thing and you can't do it or you've got these big problems.
Yeah, especially at this power level. It's just not that big of a deal.
Well, alrighty then.
So do you want to go try and put more nitrous in it?
Yeah, let's pick it up just a little bit just to be sure, because I think we'll have that objection from the fans watching that it's just too girly. With this sniper kit, we're actually able to change jets and make more power. So we're gonna go to a combination with a number 65 fuel jet, and you have a 73 on the nitrous
73
side.
nitrous.
So that's neighborhood of a 1/5 shot. Now we got the jets in it for more horsepower. We've also put some race gas in it so it won't detonate, and we pulled another 3 degrees of ignition timing out just to be safe. But nevertheless, Dulcich has gone from being like depressed at the pathetic power to super anxious that we're gonna blow it up.
I was going to say we will blow it up.
So now we're making 644.6 pound-feet of torque, and at the very same RPM, we're making 613.7 horsepower.
A lot safer now, isn't it?
It is a lot safer. The spread from the richest cylinder to the leanest cylinder is nowhere near what it was before.
Really?
Nowhere near.
Let's take a look at where we are here
Yeah, look at this.
to where we were with the smaller system.
The nitrous improved it considerably.
Yep.
It actually brought it closer together with more nitrous.
Yeah.
You know, actually running the
That's
bigger
what we learned so far.
the bigger nitrous unit was a better test.
The
would
bigger
say.
nitrous unit, I think it was a good test both ways, because we now know that the more nitrous you put through a dual plane, the more the AFR cylinder to cylinder gets closer, I'm sure up to a point.
You know, that whole distribution thing with a normal thing, and I mean, you could probably get away with 250.
Yeah.
Realistically, and not cause any issues. You know, I mean, it just takes more testing to find out where that threshold is. But I mean, I think that kind of proves the point that there's, it's not like this horrible distribution problem. It can't be done. You hear that all the time. I know you guys do.
Oh yeah, totally. Whereas now our leanest cylinder is basically 12-to-1.
Yeah.
The nitrous system is a little bit too rich. But yeah, I think we just debunked that myth. You can run at least a, 150 shot or more? Okay, well now what I want to do is put on the single plane intake manifold, see if the distribution problem still exists, and find out if the gain with the same nitrous jet is greater on the single plane than it is on the dual plane. I feel good about that test.
Yeah, me
I
too.
love debunking myths, but I'm ready to put on the single plane.
Me too.
We're about to change manifolds, but I thought first I would go over a few things because I noticed on social media, especially when I post pictures, a lot of people ask about these brawler carburetors. And so just a little quick bit of information about them. They're a new low buck line of carburetors from Holley and QFT. And people ask me, are they pretty good? And I'm gonna say yes. I've run 850 double pumpers twice now, and I've had a 750 double pumper, and these things are packed with features and have always run really good for me. So do I recommend them? Yeah, they're actually really good. Okay, you saw a little bit of a nitrous debacle when we first started trying to do our test with this old power shot system that I had with I think I bought from a swap meet someplace. I've had it forever, but it's been sitting for at least a year, probably more, and the nitrous solenoid was stuck. That often happens if these things sit around. You can rebuild these things, but obviously we did not bother with that at this point. Instead, here's what we installed, which is also from Holley and NOS. It's a product called Sniper. It's a low buck adjustable nitrous plate system. And I was just noticing that the plate here has a whole lot more holes in it than that old power shot setup that only had 4 holes for nitrous and 4 for fuel. So I think this is actually a better buy, and we're gonna jet the thing up to make 150-ish horsepower. Okay, now, manifolds. Here is that dual plane that we just ran. And you can look in there and kind of see why people think that these things don't run well on nitrous or potentially don't. They have 2 separate levels inside them. Each half goes to 4 cylinders in the engine. These things tend to make more torque and less top end horsepower, whereas what we're about to go to is the Victor single plane intake manifold. This is a nice big hairy manifold, especially when ported. I think on our 383, it's really not the manifold that I would choose for running down either the street or the drag strip, but it is going to answer those questions about fuel distribution issues and whether nitrous makes more power on this style of manifold. So we're going to go install this pooch right now. Just pull this guy aside. The cool thing about the big block Mopar is that it doesn't have water in the intake manifold, so we're going to be able to just pull off this one and slap a new one on there like nothing.
Oh man, this manifold's hot. That is no good. How come I have so much manifold lead?
Kaboom.
Right on the side of my box.
Now we're gonna have to go fire this thing up, and almost certainly it's gonna need to jet change because of the single plane versus dual plane intake. And we'll run it NA and then come back and spray it again.
I have to make the observation here that the engine looks much more racy.
Yeah, too bad it won't run that much more racy.
I know, is the downside.
Now the single plane manifold's in place and all tuned up, and we also bumped the ignition timing back to where it was when we ran the dual plane naturally aspirated. So what you're about to get is a clean A/B test of the dual plane manifold versus the single plane manifold. Most horsepower we've seen so far naturally aspirated at the cost of torque, which is completely predictable considering what we're doing.
Surprise.
There you go. The red is the dual plane, black is the single plane. The dual plane makes more torque, and you get a little bit more horsepower out of the single plane. Actually, Steve ran it higher too.
Yeah, well, it wasn't done where this dual plane was, so I went ahead and ran it 300 higher just so we could get to peak again.
Our new power peaks with the single plane intake manifold are 473.1 horsepower and 454.2 pound-feet of torque. You can see really looking at the graph, it tells a better story than just the peaks though. You know, you're giving up a lot of power below 46,700 RPM. But what we're really doing here is looking at distribution issues and nitrous. So let's have a look at what the cylinder to cylinder looked like with the single plane.
It's better, but it's not fantastic.
But will it make more power on nitrous?
Ooh, how do you find that out?
Let's go squirt this thing.
Yeah.
I'm tired of messing around with 470 horsepower. It's boring me. The last test, theoretically the good one. Single plane intake manifold, 150 shot. We pulled the timing back and whack it. The only thing I'm curious about here is, does it make more power? And I think it might, because the airflow seems to continue at a higher RPM than the dual plane. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I wonder if there was a differential there to start with, but I think it's still made more base.
Well, our power peaks are now 692 pound-feet of torque and 645.9 horsepower. So it did make more power than the dual plane, but let's analyze. Final answer on nitrous oxide on dual planes versus single planes. So peak to peak, the single plane made a whole lot more power. Single plane made 692 pound-feet of torque and 645.9 horsepower. The dual plane was 644.6 and 613.7. So the single plane made 32.2 more horsepower and 47.4 more pound-feet, right at the hit. But I'm not sure that I'm gonna call that an accurate data point.
You know, the other thing is too, is that the single plane actually made 10 horsepower more NA.
At that RPM.
Yeah, right in here as well. So,
Yeah,
you know, peak to peak. So the gain or the difference between the two maybe isn't 30, maybe it's more like 20.
Okay, but why? In the real world, that's what it is.
No, that's the numbers are the numbers. But,
Okay.
But this is mimicking just what it did with the dual plane versus single
It's coming
plane.
off a
normally
higher base, basically.
Right. We just gave the peak to peak numbers, but the peaks are right when you hit the button. And I'm not sure that that is a good data point for comparison.
It's not.
Because that's where like just how much nitrous is in the line, whether it's purged or not, can make a really big difference. And so we also looked at the difference in power all the way up at 5,500 RPM, and here's what we got. At 5,500 RPM, after everything had sort of settled down, but before it was really close to the end of the run, the dual plane made 159.5 horsepower and the single plane made 181.8. So that's 22 more horsepower up at 5,500 RPM. So I think the answer is yes. The single plane, because it flows more air, makes more power on nitrous the same way it does NA.
Well, and admittedly, both of these systems could be tuned up a little bit more, but I think we're still going to see the same difference up high because they both, we can tune them both up to be better, but I think it's still going to have a difference in sway in the favor of the single plane.
Yep. But that's a little bit of a surprise to me that that's happening down here at 5,200. I expected it to make more power way up at the top when it starts to saturate the dual plane manifold,
Yeah.
but it made it everywhere.
But conventional wisdom would indicate that the single plane's better on nitrous. That's what people believe, and
it's true.
And it's true. So
Well, it's got more volume in the intake manifold, and there's more junk going through it with the nitrous. Nitrous carries air with it, but it's still displacing air.
what about cylinder-to-cylinder distribution
Ooh,
on
good
nitrous?
one. Let's go look at that. Now what we're looking at is cylinder-cylinder distribution on the dual plane versus the single plane, black being the dual plane, red being the single plane, and obviously all of this is naturally aspirated and all of this is after we hit the button, and we really expected the single plane to be tighter, but it's not really. I mean, there's one outstanding cylinder on the dual plane that's not that good. The rest of it is actually a little tighter than the single plane.
Comes down to the design of the particular manifold, because this shows us what a single plane Victor or Super Victor on a 383 Mopar will do as far as cylinder-to-cylinder distribution on nitrous.
But you're saying it's that narrow.
I
The data's
really
that
do
narrow.
think so. I really do.
What it really shows us, though, I think that's kind of encouraging, is you don't have to be afraid to run a 150 or 175 shot on a dual plane.
And that was my point when I conceived this whole episode, because I'd be comfortable with anything up to like a 250 shot on a dual plane, honestly.
That's what the trend pretty much looks like. It actually got, when we had run the littler jet, it actually tightened up a little bit with the bigger jet than the smaller one.
Right.
So if that kind of trend holds true, I'm sure it goes away at some point.
It gets better and better.
But, a couple hundred shot, most guys who are going to do a 250 or 300 shot or something probably aren't going to be running a dual plane on the engine anyway. So if you need a little extra fun, there it is.
Here's something that the late Monty Smith from NOS told me all the time, which was the air-fuel ratio that makes the most power naturally aspirated is the AFR that makes the most power on nitrous. And so that's why I think that people don't realize they're driving around with their cylinder-to-cylinder distribution all over the map to begin with.
Yeah.
It's not a scary thing. It just is what it is. It's happened for decades, and the same's true on nitrous. So just do it. That's my answer.
I think it's a great answer.
Okay, I'm sold. Let's put nitrous on my ride.
Put nitrous on everything.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I learned something and I proved my point. That's a perfect episode.
Always makes you right, and you're always happy with that.
Right. All right, Steve, let me conclude.
All right, lay it on me, brother.
The questions I had at the beginning of the show, I think the answers are, I'm not afraid of nitrous on a dual plane.
Okay.
And a single plane does make more power.
Right.
And I think the cylinder-to-cylinder distribution is bad with any carbureted intake manifold. It just is what it is. Nobody cares.
Well, just the facts, man.
And last of all, the crop duster motor is kind of a turd.
It's like that child who's underperforming. You love it anyway, but I think maybe some remedial action might be called for here.
I think you're right. I mean, this thing used to make 500 horsepower, but that was before we ran it with these really terrible headers. I think these collectors and everything are nowhere near as good as the TTIs we had on it before. And we had an electric water pump and a different carburetor and stuff. But nonetheless, those are excuses, and I think that we need to raise the power level on this thing, and not necessarily with nitrous.
We probably can. I was proud of the nitrous numbers, though. This thing held together with pretty good amounts of nitrous.
Yeah, it did. For stock cranking rods, it wasn't bad at all. So. Yeah. I think our plan now is finish painting the crop duster and then hop this thing up a little bit, and maybe, just maybe if we do, you'll see it on a future episode of Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL.